This is Johnny Dosco. Stay tuned for another Scoresheet podcast. Holy Kadelka!
Hello, and welcome to another Scoresheet podcast. This podcast is liable to be a little brief because we're deep in the process of finalizing our 2012 player lists. Those should be up on the web January 24th. We seem to be right on schedule for that. But I was reading a few emails today and I thought about some trade issues. There's basically two kinds of Scoresheet leagues. There's continuing leagues or keeper leagues where teams protect players from year to year. And then there's one-year leagues where teams draft from scratch each year. It's the trades in continuing leagues are a little trickier. So I want to remind folks, especially ones that maybe haven't been in a continuing league for a lot of years, that there's a big difference in the value of a trade whether you make it before protected lists are turned in or after protected lists are turned in. For instance, if you trade a draft pick for a player and you do it now before turning in your protected list in early February, then you're not only giving up a draft pick to get that player, you're also giving up the rights to protect a guy you would have protected if you had not traded for this player. So for instance, if you were going to protect Smith as your 13th player, if you trade a round 20 pick for Jones and then protect Jones, that means you're really giving up the round 20 pick plus Smith because you can no longer protect Smith. The same thing's true if you trade one really good player for, say, four pretty good players. You know, in the mid-season, that might be a great trade to fill some holes and get you into the playoffs. But if you do it right now, you're not only giving up the star player, you're also giving up the three extra players you could have protected before. So you might consider that when making a trade. It's a trade that makes a lot of sense for your team in March after protected lists have been turned in, when you could trade one player for four, and that means you just have three more players in your team. It's not really the same thing as making a trade now when you're still only going to get to protect, say, 13 players. So that's one thing to keep in mind, especially if you're new to continuing leagues. If you're in a one-year league, you don't have any issues of trading in the off-season before the draft starts. You're just thinking about preparing for your draft. There are a lot of books, magazines, websites that have come out now with their 2012 player projections, or just now hitting the bookshelves. One thing I'd like to warn you about, especially if you're rather new to Scoresheet, is not to use magazines or websites that give rotisserie dollar values for players. Those rotisserie values are often quite different than a player's real baseball worth due to things like steals, runs scored, saves, pitcher wins, all being rather inflated in value in a standard rotisserie league. Fortunately, there are a lot of websites that just talk about what a player will do in the upcoming Major League season. And when you're on one of those sites, what you want to concentrate on is, for hitters, OPS, which is on-base plus slugging percentage, or for pitchers, what their expected ERA will be next year. But once again, the dollar values or even the mock draft values you see are generally for rotisserie leagues. Unfortunately, Scoresheet has a lot less players than the big ESPN rotisserie leagues do, so most magazine and websites are dedicated towards those rules. Dave and I did talk a week or two ago about the various leagues we have forming this year. If you're interested in joining a league and have any questions, please feel free to give us a call or send us an email. Like I said, the player list will be out January 24th. We'll be forming leagues, specific leagues, putting people into leagues shortly after that. Or if you're in a continuing league, if it's a league we run, we'll be asking for keeper lists around the first week of February. So we're getting ready here for a season. Pitchers and catchers report in, 4.5 weeks. So even though it's half raining, half snowing in our parking lot right now, it is definitely time to start thinking baseball. Thanks, and have a great 2012 season.